You are watching the Fayetteville Government Channel. Up next, full coverage of the latest meeting of the Environmental Action Committee. The Environmental Action Committee is composed of citizen volunteers and meets on the third Monday of each month. The committee advises the City Council regarding environmental issues facing the City of Fayetteville and its residents. And now, the Environmental Action Committee.
Okay. All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you to everyone who could make it, and I think this was a good lesson for the rest of the committee. We really have to be serious about starting on time and attendance. I'm going to sit over here instead of at the head today because we're going to use this display. But let's start by going around the room and introducing ourselves for the folks that are watching. I'm Sarah Marsh. I am the committee chair, and I represent the citizens of Ward 1 on the Fayetteville City Council.
Peter Niergarten, I'm the city's director of sustainability and strategic planning and the staff representative to the Environmental Action Committee.
I'm Richard Russell, a local resident many years, have a degree in geology, have a slot as a science member of the committee.
My name is Carrie Lane. I'm a resident of Ward 3 and director of the Northwest Arkansas Land Trust.
I'm Connie Crisp. I'm a citizen of Fayetteville, Arkansas.
I'm Dana Smith. I'm a member at large on the committee, and I'm also the sustainability coordinator for Fayetteville Public Schools.
I'm Aubrey Shepard, and I'm the oldest surviving member of the committee. Not necessarily the longest serving.
All right. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to invasive species removal and as part of our 2013 goals and topics. Peter, would you like to talk to us about that?
Sure. So you guys will remember we have a let's see, a long list of goals and topics for the Environmental Action Committee for 2013. And I got an email back in March from Pete Heinzelman. Does that name ring a bell with anybody?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
He's head of the
Sierra Club.
Yeah.
He's head of Fayetteville Natural Heritage.
Yeah.
So he wanted to know. It's not worth opening it up. But anyway, he wanted to know what was going on at the city around invasive species removal. And of course, Parks and Recreation does most of the city's invasive species removal, typically focused around our park areas, along some trails and whatnot. It's not something that we are, I would say, as a city, it's not the #1 priority, but it does get done, but probably more on an ad hoc basis. But the question came to me through Connie, the Parks and Rec director. Did the Environmental Action Committee want to spend any of our energy and time focused on invasive species, specifically bush honeysuckle is what Pete was referring to in his email. So I look back at our list of projects, and I didn't see anywhere where we listed out anything related to invasive species or bush honeysuckle. And so I wanted to ask the committee, did you all want to add that to your list of goals and topics for, yeah, that's a little bit better, thank you, for 2013. I don't know that necessarily means that we have to do anything with it, but we can put it on here for potential future discussion. I didn't have any things specifically related around it to talk about. I do have bush honeysuckle is identified as one of the non-native plants on the city's endangered species list, along with the Japanese honeysuckle as well.
Invasive species list.
Invasive.
It's not endangered.
Invasive species. Check that mistake that I just made. But anyway, so it is on our non-native plants list, our invasive species list. I have done battle with lots of bush honeysuckle in my backyard over the past year, and so I'm all too familiar with it. But anyway, I didn't want to add it to the list without consulting you all since it's your list.
Is the idea to increase education about it, or to actually do some removal, do some service time?
Could be whatever you guys want to do with it.
The list we're adding it to is a list of other plants that should be removed?
No, it's a list of 2013 goals and topics for the Environmental Action Committee.
Yeah, it's already on the list of things that should be removed.
Right.
Which list is it already on?
It is already on the city's list of invasive species. What it is not on is on this committee's list of things we want to focus on for the 2013.
Why would we choose one of the items on that list rather than all of them?
Because this one was specifically requested to be added to our list by Pete Heinzelman.
You mean picking one species of invasive plant? I think
And it wouldn't necessarily.
it wouldn't be necessarily.
Yeah, we wouldn't necessarily have to stick with just one.
Yeah.
We just didn't have anything on invasive species, and so.
So this list came from what source?
We have this in the office in there. Let's see, it's got U of A,
Cindy Cope, Fayetteville and Bloom.
Yeah, Fayetteville and Bloom.
Fayetteville Natural Heritage Association.
Don Pennington, so the Ag Extension Service looks like they were involved, or the Washington County Extension Service.
Von Steincross, so, yeah. Collaborative.
Well, I certainly believe it. I mean, I personally, we have a weed wrench which will pull a honeysuckle bush about this big.
Yeah,
One pull.
You let me use it, Aubrey.
I do use it, and I was going to let you use it.
You did let me use it.
Oh, did you take it?
No, remember that at the,
Oh, I showed you. I demonstrated, and you did one. But, I mean, I think it's something everybody ought to be trying to do yourself, and a weed wrench is a magical tool.
Where does one get a weed wrench?
Online, there's a company.
Is there a local
just-
source? Like, can you pick them up at the
No,
farmer's co-op?
no. Not now. I think we could probably urge somebody to do that. But right now, they're $200 or more. But it's the difference in spending an hour with a pick, chopping around the outside, and then sawing it off, and then trying to dig it out with shovels. And you can only do that in wet weather. But with a weed wrench, it doesn't have to be as wet for the ground to allow you to do it. And in moist soil areas where much of this is growing, along streams and in wetland, which is abundant, although it's rapidly being dirtied over. And the developers get rid of it for us when they do that, of course, and everything good along with it. But we should be involved in that, yes, absolutely. Advocating it, doing some of it ourselves, and but it's not all the species that are on that list. You know, you can do some of each of them at the same time. To say we're just going to focus on bush honeysuckle. Well, Japanese honeysuckle kills more other plants directly. It winds tight, and the trees don't grow, and pretty soon, you know, I think that it does not grow on China honeysuckle, unfortunately. That's the name of the bush. So I think we should try to include that in our purpose. We've got a lot of things up here on the list.
Yeah, it is a big list. I would say that realistically, I don't know what this group, how much of a dent we could put in it this year, but it falls within our green infrastructure and wildlife habitat goals as well. I mean, this is a component of that awareness about, feral cats, awareness about invasive species, all things that can somehow influence quality of wildlife habitat in the city and around. So I would be for putting it on the list, even as a subheading under that category or something. But.
Well, I had learned recently that our library, you can go and check out a fishing pole at the public library. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it's something that maybe we could find some money to allow people to check out a weed wrench. And it comes with a list of invasive species like this. And if we put a couple of those at the library and get them to help us promote this, maybe that could help people get some of these out, and then that doesn't require quite as much action from us.
But you would have the education if you gave them a list and so on.
Yeah, if we had, gave this brochure with the weed wrench, and you were able to check that out.
And if I may, Madam Chairman, we possibly could actually influence some, there are still apparently places you can buy these invasive plants and plant them. They're for sale somewhere in town, because I know somebody 2 years ago that was on the garden tour, and a lady was showing us, she was so proud of her China honeysuckle bush. And I'm like, oh my gosh. You know, but, and I noticed that they're almost everywhere, in every park. And they're along every stream. And if you pull them out of those stream banks, you just lose a lot of soil. It's a very difficult thing to do that and then replace them with a native species. You need to do that immediately if possible.
And net that
And
in
in
too.
sections.
And
Yeah, you do have to net it.
so,
Do we want to?
I'd make a motion that we include this on our list of concerns.
I think we had some, well, Richard, do you want to go first, and then we'll take some public?
Do we want to say something about a replacement component to removal and replacement?
There is a lot of information out there about native plants, like there's a native plant brochure that lists shrubs that can give people suggestions, you're saying?
Point being, when you have used the weed wrench, you have created a place to plant something, because you pull the root ball out.
Yeah.
And that's an economy of energy there to be all set. Go on a wet day and be all set with something to put it back. It might be a more rounded approach.
Yeah.
Circle of life.
Well, let's hear from the public. David?
Well, I agree with removing these invasive species. I wanted to point out that it says under invasive vines, it said to treat with herbicide, and also up above it said treats with herbicides. And I'm really concerned about the widespread use of herbicides, and I'm not sure if the city uses things like Roundup, but Roundup is now recognized to be an endocrine disruptive chemical. And I would just be really concerned about this committee recommending or endorsing something that says that it advises the public to go out and use herbicides, with the only qualification being following label instructions. Well, there are very few people I know that have ever read those label instructions, and they're out there spraying Roundup willy-nilly all over their yards and sidewalks and stuff, and that's just in their own lawns. So I would just, hope that, that would be taken into consideration. Thank you.
That's a very good point, especially with these, a lot of them being located on streams. That's where it is on my property. And I've wondered about, how do I pull it out and then the stream bank erodes, so I haven't touched it. But I noticed somebody had planted a brand new Bradford pear a few years ago in my yard. And, I think I've got to take that down, but I don't have the resources to do it personally. So maybe it's an education component and resource assistance.
I'm not an expert, but I was somewhat familiar when this was being created, and I know that the recommendation for actually getting rid of especially bush honeysuckle, if you can't get it up by the root, is it really does no good to cut it off if you don't immediately put a little something that'll suck down into the root system. I know that's where that is coming from, is that it just resprouts with a vengeance. I mean, you could cut it every 2 weeks and it just grows back. So I agree with there. I don't know what's on the back side. I can't remember exactly if it says anything else about that. Recommended technique for removing non-natives from riparian areas. I'm pretty sure it addresses, you only want to spot it to the stump, not spray it all over, which I agree people do like crazy, but just to the stump and not within so many days of an anticipated rain and that kind of stuff. I can't remember exactly all the wording on it, but.
We actually had a little bit of a discussion about this with our Parks and Rec department. We were thinking about doing a Green Your Life video on invasive species removal, and when we talked to them about the different areas we wanted to highlight, one of the things that they came back to us with was this idea or this issue of erosion caused by
Yes.
removal. And what they had suggested was that you did spot treat. You cut it, dug out maybe some of it, but that you spot treated to help keep your erosion at a minimum because you didn't wind up removing as much of the roots.
Yeah.
And we sustainable and strategic planning really couldn't come to terms with highlighting that as a removal technique for a Green Your Life series, and so we opted to kind of put that off and do urban chickens instead. So
Thank you.
it's, I mean, just to say all that, it's I don't know, it's tough. It's not black and white, and I'm not exactly sure where the solution lies. Definitely, caution should be used if you are going to choose to apply herbicide.
And which herbicide you use. I mean, some of them have a really quick, again, I'm not an expert, and I'm not going to say this right, but their life cycle in the environment can be pretty short-lived, certain kinds. And if they're right on the stump at the time of cutting, they go there and they don't necessarily hang around and wash around. At least
that's what it says, and that's what the company puts out.
Maybe
but
so.
Now the fact that it's endocrine disrupting chemicals that are persistent, and especially in waters near streams. So
it might be worth having the experts come and present to us maybe when we.
Yeah.
I think that's
Well,
good.
the answer to the question about the park department does use herbicide
Okay.
routinely. And I've been driving by Walker Park soccer fields and could smell it. Look out there, and here's the machine going and just broadcasting it on the soccer field. Now this is, they've started putting up a sign, don't go walking out here for, today or whatever, but in some areas, in some cases. But, Wilson Park's got a nice berry of China honeysuckle area there. It's also got some native, both vines and Japanese vines and so forth. They've got some beautiful native honeysuckle plants there in a bed, but the barrier along the edge is China honeysuckle and whatever trees and shrubs are there otherwise, and Japanese honeysuckle growing there. It's a big thing. They can't get all that done. And so one thing, though, was asked about alternatives. You see at the bottom, dogwoods, hollies, redbuds, spicebush, sassafras, pawpaw, serviceberry, hawthorn, native sweet crabapple, milkweed, echinacea, black-eyed Susans, and blue-stem grass. Anyway, you don't need the extra S. But anyhow, this is important for us to talk about. And the pesticides and herbicides both show up later in human beings, many years. My father had a growth on his leg 50 years after he had been a boy using pesticides in the cotton field when he was a boy in Louisiana, and this big knot comes on his right leg. And his wife insisted he go to the doctor after a while. It got bigger and bigger. And the doctor looked at his leg and said, "Well, Mr. Shepherd, when you were a young man, you lived on a farm." "Yes, sir." "And you had cotton, right? And where did you carry your poison bag?" He said, "Right here on my belt, on my right side on my belt." He said, "And yes, every time you took a step, it slapped against your leg, didn't it?" He said, "Well, yes, sir." "Well, it's taken this long, but this is what happens. You cannot predict from a company's claims about safety of any chemical, really. And we know that from our food supply and many other situations. Later on, we find out so-and-so's got drawbacks. So
The
Have to have a lot of weed wrenches.
yeah, I don't mean to interject or interrupt.
No, go ahead.
But the request was whether or not you all wanted to add it to your list of things to discuss. It does sound
We
like it's
have.
something
Yeah,
that folks have interest
yeah,
in.
that's a yes.
So I heard
A
her.
motion. We've got one more bit of public comment, and then I think we should, go ahead, sir.
Well, I just had a couple. One is bush honeysuckle has a very shallow root and it's easy to root up. And the other is that a great many pesticides decay and as an end result of dioxin. And some research really needs to be to check some of them out. And some are, at least I've heard, it may have been a rumor or something about some of the really commonly used. I don't think it was necessarily Roundup, but the end result was supposed to be dioxin, which as we know is bad medicine.
It's called Agent Orange in Vietnam.
All right, well, we have a motion on the table. Would anyone like to second that? That we go ahead and add this to our list of priorities for the year?
Second it.
We have a second?
Is that to add, that's to add just invasive species in general?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, we got a.
One quick,
Go ahead.
just
Richard?
maybe, invasive plant species?
Yes.
Yeah.
As opposed
Plant.
to
Animal.
animals? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I second the motion to add invasive plant species to our potential 2013 goals and topics for the EAC.
All right, any final comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. We will be adding that to our agenda.
Done.
Priority list. Okay. Next up, we are going to talk about our Enduring Green Network and have a review from Peter.
Yeah, so if you guys remember back when Sarah Lewis was still here, there was discussion around the Enduring Green Network and how to offer this group some level of review of projects that are touching our Enduring Green Network. And so what we developed as staff, rotate that, is a little form that our planning department, when they're first reviewing the input of projects that are submitted to the city, they added a checklist to their sheet that asks, does the project touch the Enduring Green Network? And so they, every 2 weeks, hand me one of these sheets, and it lists off which projects touch the Enduring Green Network or not. And then I take a look in a little bit more detail at the projects and try to determine if if the whole project touches the Enduring Green Network, or if part of the site maybe just touches it, but the development that's proposed actually doesn't affect the Enduring Green Network, or if it's really something that I think you all would actually want to hear about. And those that I feel like you do want to hear about, like this one here, I changed to a no for some, I can't remember the exact reason, but I think it had to do with the fact that it barely touched it or didn't really touch it at all. I'm not sure. But anyway, if I do feel like you all are interested in it, then what I've been doing is sending you an email with some of the information on the project. And the most recent one that I sent to you guys was, according to my records, was back in March, and I hadn't heard any reply at all from you guys, and so that's kind of why I'm wanting to ask the question whether or not this is something we're still interested in hearing about, if I need to be giving you more information, less information. So the one I emailed you about, I'll read you the what I sent to you guys. It was a 3-part email that had some other stuff. But in other news, I received a notice today from the planning department about a project located inside the Enduring Green Network that will be heard at City Council next Tuesday night. The 17-acre site is located near the intersection of Gregg and Van Ash along Skull and Mud Creeks. And is being proposed for rezoning from C1 to P1, so that's commercial to institutional zoning, in an effort to build a future charter school, Haas Hall Academy. According to the Development Services Department, the site was originally graded and raised above the floodplain several years ago. Therefore, many of the sensitive features originally associated with the site were removed at that time. And then I included a link to the project that basically took you to this and showed you the site. So this is Van Ash and Gregg. If you can picture this area, it's a big pasture basically. It's basically a big flat spot that was leveled off with red dirt.
It's been completely covered with red dirt.
Right, here you can see Skull Creek, and so that was why the commentary I added was that, yeah, technically the Enduring Green Network basically runs along Skull Creek. I don't know the exact dimensions of it, but the site definitely falls within it. But the spirit of what the Enduring Green Network is supposed to protect, which is, the environmental sensitive nature of the potential areas along a sensitive feature, are essentially gone with this site. So the opportunity has already been missed. But this was just one example, and I sent you that information, didn't hear anything back, and I'm just wondering, am I giving you all the right amount of information? Do you want to hear less? Do you want to hear more? We don't need to specifically talk about this project. I'm more interested to hear your feedback on the process and whether or not it's working for you guys or not.
The process worked for me. I visualized the property, understood what it was, and didn't need to think about it anymore because
That's what
I realized the story was already over in this case.
Okay.
Is that
Should have
okay?
responded in some way.
That's fine.
I wasn't sure whether, I didn't really have a comment other
Yeah.
than looking at it.
Okay.
I mean, I could have come in and said, is there something I'm supposed to be looking for here?
No.
But I do remember getting that,
Okay.
so.
I don't need extra email, so I don't need you to tell me that, if you don't have a comment. But I just hadn't heard any comments, and so I wanted to ask the question.
Did you have a concern about it?
I had no specific concern about this. I didn't think you guys would want to go to city council and, interrupt the rezoning effort because, it's obviously not an environmentally sensitive,
Would you tell us if you did have a concern?
I definitely would, yeah.
Okay, because that would be more what we would respond to. I mean, if there was something that you felt was not what it should be on.
Okay.
I think my only comment would be just instead of burying it in an email with other stuff, maybe just put the title Enduring Green Network
Okay.
Alert and
All
have
right.
its own email.
Yeah.
Okay.
That way it doesn't get lost in
That sounds
other
good.
stuff.
I can do that.
But otherwise, I did review it and I came to the same conclusion. There was nothing worth saving.
And thank you for doing that, because that
Yes.
is extra work for you to do
No,
that.
I mean, yes.
If
I mean,
it's-
that's what the process was set up to do, and I just kind of wanted to, we're a couple months in, I just wanted to check it. And
Right.
I'm curious if the Enduring Green Network gets incrementally modified as we identify parts of it that are not green or enduring.
whether or not the
Could-
boundary should be affected
Could
to.
somehow this,
Yeah.
since this is recognized as having been altered, can we remove it? Does it go into, this Enduring Green Network, is it a map that is interactive, or is it just a plan that was in place and there is no way to?
I don't know the answer to that question. If it's similar to our other mapped overlays, then it gets like officially adopted as a boundary, and it has you don't just change it piecemeal. You change you don't change it piecemeal as you go. You change it like once every 5 years with a
So-
new adoption. So it could be removed at that point.
Is that another little troublesome task, to keep track of things that are identified as not qualifying anymore for whatever reason?
Well, I
Well-
think it shouldn't be removed just because it doesn't necessarily have the characteristics now. I think it still is good to notice that on the map that this was part of the Enduring Green Network. And I mean, it still is. And it could be, if the people who are developing it, I mean, if they also saw that layer, that could be a signal to them. I mean, it's Haas Hall.
Yeah, us all, the kids themselves might want to
They might plant more or be pretty intentional with.
reclaim it.
Right. So I don't think removal of anything that's in the network would be necessary.
Well, if I may, Madam Chairman, I agree it should not be, the original map should be maintained as it is, but to look at several issues that have gone on in the past, there was a 5-year limit. If you own a piece of property and remove the trees, then you have to wait 5 years before you're free and clear of the sin, and you're allowed to build as though it didn't have that canopy. Now, this was working a few years ago. In certain places, I can show you that occurred. It was basically cleared when there wasn't a development ready to go, and then 5 years later, they came through and it flies right through. And that's part of the enduring green network that we can see if we look at it and go out and see what's happened. A lot of these things have been changed in the meantime. And another thing that we're not remembering, I think, in this process with the rapid development is that we do have credits. If somebody is changing the wetland area in particular, then they can be asked to buy credits, the extra credits from Woolsey Wet Prairie, and there are other parcels in the city that they could buy directly and actually donate to be protected in perpetuity. And that would offset what they're doing. And that could be used even to make up for these small lots in South Fayetteville that are being red dirted and devegetated. And it's certainly for the large projects such as this, you know, they could participate in something like that, and it wouldn't be all that expensive. But it's a separate thing from the park dedication. See, that when they go to the park board, it's one of the first things the developers do, and they look around and, well, there's nothing there. The park board, the park department doesn't really want this little tiny parcel that they'd be required to give, so they pay some money in lieu. Well, some of that can be, you know, directed at some wetland and wooded areas, not just to open space for ball field, or to parcels of prairie, which are routinely not accepted voluntarily unless they know they can use it for a ball field or something. So there are ways to look at these things, but remembering all the ins and outs of it, Peter, you hadn't been here long enough to even have read some of those old things, I bet, that were in place. And I can't even remember all of them, but.
Well, it's my understanding that the wetlands credits are not available for purchase yet. I don't believe we have the ability to sell any wetlands credits out of our wetland bank.
I don't know the answer to
Not
that
at this point.
question.
When we went and toured the wetland prairie as a council, and that was something that was mentioned, is that they would like to do in the future, but there's some approval that they need to go through that they have not been able to do yet. But it's in the works, but it's just not ready yet.
I have a question about the process for this too. Now that that column for Enduring Green Network is on that, is that something that the developer sees when they look at it? So do they know that that's something that you all are looking at? Is it in the Enduring Green Network? And if it is in the Enduring Green Network, are they
notified?
They notified.
That sheet is a staff check sheet, so it's not something that developers are looking at. I do think, though, that when that the Enduring Green Network is a layer that's on our GIS, it is available for everyone to see. So when someone is reviewing a site, yes, they can see whether or not they're in the Enduring Green Network. But to my knowledge, it's not something that we notify them about.
I think that would be helpful. And another thing that I've noticed is we've not been notifying people who are developing in an area that has a neighborhood master plan. An issue that's coming up before the council this week is a planned industrial development down on Cato Springs Road, and there's a Cato Springs or a Fayette Junction master plan that was done by the community. And I noticed that the development proposal really doesn't incorporate any of the goals from that master plan, and so I don't think that they were given that plan. So that might be something that, in addition to Enduring Green Network alert.
Yeah, it is typically mentioned as part of a staff report. Of course, that's a staff report to Planning Commission or to Council, but it's generally provided to the applicant. And I don't know, we'd have to talk with planning and find out what they're more, when they have conversations with developers. I'm not sure how early in the conversation the discussion about an existing plan comes up, or the Enduring Green Network comes up.
And if there was, is there any kind of handout or something to give to them to say, you know, not only that your property's in it, but what that means.
Yeah, no, not that I know of.
So I don't think we have any ability to hold them to anything, but we could certainly
Increase
strongly
awareness.
suggest
Yeah,
and
it's definitely,
educate.
I mean, the idea of the plans is that they're used as a guidance tool, so, to your point, having it
And
earlier in the conversation as a piece of guidance when you're developing your project would definitely make sense.
Yeah, like at first contact with the planning department. I feel like that should come
If I
out.
may, I think the FNHA and people that were on the various committees, Dr. James and Joe Neal and a lot of people, Bruce Shackelford, a lot of people that involved with natural area things were on that committee, and the expectation and hope was that we would see this effort actually allow people to know ahead of time when they're talking about buying property for development that this is wetland. There was something in the newspaper about some other city putting in some ball field and stuff. And you could see the willow trees growing in the middle of it on television, and the tall grass probably had little blue stem, big blue stem, and all sorts of wildflowers out there if you could have seen it better. But if we have that document, and it could help, but the place that all these 2 men have died in the last 3 months, on Rocher Heights,
Yes.
that was part of one of the places I put in to that plan, and I thought it was all included as
As a wetland?
a package. No, it's a mountaintop,
Oh.
but it's part of the network. It had amazing plants and so forth up there, and very delicate situation, and they blasted it out. It's mountaintop removal, in effect. So plenty of things have been passed that violate the network over the last few years, and it's happening fast, and that's why it's great if Peter alerts us. At least we can talk about it. If it doesn't stop it, maybe it'll mitigate it or cause them to do something to show respect for that.
So that was part of the Enduring Green Network, that mountaintop? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I'm looking at it on the city website. I don't think it is a map layer that you can overlay and interact with. I'm not positive, I haven't been able to get to all of it, but I think this would be a great, another sort of special topic for a whole meeting, because just reading so it was FNHA's Green Infrastructure Plan was adopted by the city, and so it's supposed to be a zoning tool. Just a lot of the things let's see. Hold on, let me find what I wanted to say. Let's see, in the long run, only public component. Oh well, anyway, that it's supposed to basically be there as a tool for a lot of people that apparently aren't seeing it. Planners and developers and policymakers, decision makers, all that. It's kind of like a secret sort of,
Yeah.
And
I've looked at those maps and I've never seen it on there. So I don't think that it's readily available.
one of the layers. That would be a
Yeah, and I think it would be nice if we just set up some kind of an alert for when someone comes in to find information about a parcel, and if we had a handout that said, oh, it's in the Enduring Green Network, this is what that means.
I think we need that. I could use that here a little bit. As far as having a program on that, I think it would be a good idea.
Okay. All right, so.
I just have a quick question. So there's really no enduring part of this network. It seems kind of like a pointless exercise if there's not going to be any enforcement.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we're grappling with is, okay, so we've adopted this now, how do we do something about it? And, Peter gave us the alert, this property was already gone, there's really not any point in saving that, but if there had been something that was worth saving and it had come to the council, I certainly would have spoken against it, or, I think it'd be good for our planning department to work with the developer to help do it in a more sensitive manner. So I don't know what the process is, and I'm still learning about all of this as well.
Yeah, well, I'll talk with planning a little bit about that. And so, because, I mean, I don't review projects that come in, so I don't have the greatest understanding of how those conversations go. But yeah, let me talk with them a little bit more, and maybe it would make sense to have someone from planning come and explain that development, you know, those steps to you all, so that we can all have a better understanding of it.
Well, we have done, I mean, it is new, and it's a
Yeah.
huge step. I mean, a lot of cities don't even have such a thing on their radar, you know, so we can be proud of that. But here's what I was looking for. I was going to read. Effective land use planning begins with the community's goals for green infrastructure. Okay, we have goals for green infrastructure to be followed over time by zoning and other supportive ordinances. Code tools such as tree ordinance, we have that. Riparian buffer ordinance, we have that. Or a conservation subdivision ordinance can build parts of a green infrastructure network. Non-regulatory tools involving education, best management practices, so on and so forth. So, I mean, short of ordinances that say, you know, heavy-handed, I guess it's,
Yeah.
Or real.
And
yeah.
And we do have some of the pieces. So it sounds like you guys are interested in having a little bit clear notification on one of these projects. It's the only thing in the email. And then I'll talk with the planning department about how we could better emphasize the enduring green network to the development community.
Do we need a motion for that or not?
No, I don't think so.
I don't
Okay.
think so.
Thank you.
And then that's actually a good tie-in. Another good thing that we could talk to the planning department about, maybe they could come and talk to us as part of that, is green building incentives, which is the next thing on our agenda. So coming before the council for the third and final reading on Tuesday is a package of updates to our form-based codes. And I think a lot of it is really good, but I think there's an opportunity that we have not taken advantage of to give some incentives for green building and energy efficient buildings. One of the things up for discussion will be the building heights, because right now we have building heights. You can either build a building that I believe is 4 stories or 65 feet, just as an example in one of our planning districts. And so they're seeking to clarify that as just 65 feet instead of 4 stories. Now, my concern on that is, having worked in the architectural field for developers, what that means is they're going to try and cram as many stories into 65 feet as they can. So you get a lot of 8-foot spaces and what we call pancake buildings, just stacks of low-story spaces, because they want as much floor area ratio as they can get for property values. But what I've seen happen in other municipalities is it's called an FAR ratio bonus. And FAR is the floor area ratio. And what it does is it allows a developer an added height or density bonus for meeting certain sustainability standards. Commonly, it's a LEED standard. So if we were to do this, this form-based zoning alteration, we could say maybe, you know, anyone can build a building up to 4 stories. But if you build a building that meets LEED Gold, you can have that extra story. And what that does, it costs the city absolutely nothing to implement, but it gives them a whole other floor of real estate. So that's a very powerful economic incentive for them to meet better energy efficiency standards, or to, you know, go further in terms of sustainable site strategies. So I've been looking around at other municipalities to see what they've been doing, and I'm seeing a lot of incentives also for affordable housing. So there are a lot of different ways that we can use these FAR bonuses to incentivize different desirable attributes in our community. And so what I'm thinking about doing is, on Tuesday night, making a motion to remove some of the very specific language from the proposal on the table regarding building heights, and so that we can let the rest of those very good amendments pass, and then trying to convene a task force to basically look specifically at sustainable building incentives. And what I would like to know from you all is if this is something you think is a good thing, if it's something you'd like to be involved in, and if so, to what degree?
Well, I'm very interested in that subject too, and what you said about the incentives for those things. If everything's equal in a building, a low ceiling, I mean, in every other process going on, a lower ceiling height in each floor would allow more right in front. You realize that had to be more efficient for
Not
utility
necessarily.
use, wouldn't it?
No, because heat striates, and so when a lot of older buildings in the south have tall ceilings because there's a place for that heat to go.
Right.
And so if you were interested in using natural ventilation even part of the year, having a taller space is actually more desirable in terms of energy efficiency. And also, you get taller windows, the taller apertures, which is better for natural light and projecting the natural light further, deeper into the space. So you can save a lot on lighting as well by having taller spaces. So there's no inherent energy efficiency benefits in those shorter spaces.
Okay. Good explanation.
That was.
That architecture. I think it sounds great. Thank you for bringing that up and for doing some of the research behind it. I really like the idea of doing it as an incentive. I think that that's going to be the most effective with our developers, and I think especially if it gives them some economic benefit, and that directly correlates. You know, you do this, you get this, and you get this benefit. So I think that I'm not familiar. I haven't been following what else is included. You said that the other languages is good. And
the other languages, it's really they deal with automotive-based businesses and different standards about what's going to happen at the street. And basically, we've had this form-based code in place for a few years
About
now.
4 years, I think.
And so they've had an opportunity to see what is working and what isn't working. And even the height changes that they've proposed, I think generally are a good idea. I really very supportive. You know, when planning department comes to me, I mean, I take their recommendations very seriously, and I want to support them in making those changes that they need. But I just saw this as an opportunity to leverage the building heights as a way to get something that is important to our community, which is saving energy and keeping that money back in our economy. I became familiar with this when I was working in Seattle as a sustainable building consultant. What sparked the Big Green movement there was specifically these FAR bonuses. You could add 3 stories to your building if you would get LEED Silver. And so developers came and they were not happy about this at first. And they're like, oh, what do we have to do to get LEED Silver? You know, let's not spend any more money than we absolutely have to. Just get us a certification so we can have taller buildings. And so we did. And in the process of doing that, they learned how much they were seeing better operating costs on their buildings. They were seeing a higher quality of construction, and they were seeing much lower occupancy rates because people liked the green buildings. And when you're trying to attract green companies, they want to come and move into green buildings. And so they started seeing the advantages of that, and then they'd see, oh, well, that developer over there is going to do LEED Silver, we're going to do LEED Gold, and we're going to one-up them. And it became a race to the top. And it cost, you know, the city really nothing to do. But it really created a lot of value. It created a lot of jobs in sustainability. And it helped a lot of project teams learn better best management practices that they could then apply to other projects that maybe weren't seeking those environmental certifications.
I think that's the way to go about the change and bringing the people on board that aren't of our same mindset all the time. And the same thing can be applied to green infrastructure, maybe to the Enduring Green Network. You know, you want to develop in an area that's part of that, then maybe there's some way to kind of apply that same thought process, because it also is economically, I think we also see, and some developers have seen, people want to live near green space. They want to live where they can get their bike and ride and connect to the trail and not have to put it on the car and drive to the trail, you know, that kind of thing. People want to live in those areas. So I love that. I think that's the same way we should maybe be
Yeah.
approaching the green infrastructure.
And maybe with the Enduring Green Network, you know, I don't know if there's a percentage of site you can develop in that network, then we could set it kind of small, and we could say, well, if you meet these low impact development strategies and you do all this extra stuff, well, then you can develop a larger part of your site because you're doing so responsibly. And so maybe that's an opportunity to incentivize.
I like that.
This just came up with you saying this. Let's take it back to invasive species too. If we want to, if there's some way to get a grant where if you get rid of some of those invasive species, we will then give you natural plants, native plants to put in place of that. So yeah. So all that as far as incentive goes. So we could do that with any of this.
Well, and in researching these different incentives, there are municipalities that everyone who develops pays in, you know, a certain percentage or a dollar amount per square footage into a fund, and then it's comes back as grants or awards to the projects that meet certain standards. So that would be another way that we could funnel some money back to
I like that.
Too.
I have one, it's like a technical how would it work question for your original proposal on bonuses for LEED buildings. So you don't actually get your LEED certification until you're done.
Right.
Right? So you know, as a city, I say, okay, developer, yeah, you say you're going to build a green building, and I'm going to give you 3 extra stories on, you know, as part of your approval, but I don't actually know that you built me a green building until, you know, everything is done, you know, year and a half from now. How do you handle that?
They have leveraged fines. In Seattle, it's $500 a day for non-compliance after you get your certificate of occupancy. So there's a very hefty incentive to go in and fix what you did not get right. So you don't take advantage of that unless you know that you are.
So if you were going to develop in the Enduring Green Network, and you said, okay, I'll do this incentive program and I'll do the site plan this way, then the site plan is approved and the incentive's approved based on you building as per the site plan. And if you don't, then
you're leveraged a heavy fine until you bring it into compliance.
That's a good point. Not everybody does what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Well, and if
Or what they
it's
say they're
LEED
doing.
certification too, there's the beauty of the program is that it's a third-party verification, so that they are verifying that. But that also means then that they can say that they're going to do it, and it may or may not quite meet what needs to be
It's a
done.
little bit out of their control. I mean, most of it is in their control.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of that, I mean, you do verify during construction,
Yeah.
so it's not like it's an all or nothing at the end. And I mean, generally you want to aim at least 3 points higher than your minimum certification requirement to give you some wiggle room. And there, you know, maybe then you have to go back and buy some green power offsets. There are points that you can add on and purchase and buy. You know, maybe you have to go back and put a rainwater harvesting system on your roof. And so, you know, but that's cheaper than paying those fines that add up pretty quickly. But and it doesn't necessarily have to be LEED. You know, there's Green Globes, there's Living Building Challenge. There's a lot of different benchmarks that we can set, because I certainly don't want this to be a giveaway to the USGBC or any, you know, specific organization. But you know, we could look at those standards and see what we want to do.
where does our LID ordinance fit into this picture? I mean, it's an ordinance, but it's not a requirement, right? It's an ordinance that recommends. Or,
It's essentially, it's a, as I understand, it's like a parallel option.
parallel option, okay.
I don't.
Then, what if they opt in or opt out? There's no matter either way. So maybe that could be kind of the guide somehow for
I don't know that, I mean, unless you're,
the incentive,
I don't know that there is a lot of incentive built into.
doing it that way. Yeah.
There's not a lot of incentive to opt in.
Okay, right, that's what I was getting at.
I guess, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, because I had called and talked to planning about this development on Cato Springs, because you know, everyone is excited that there's going to be some more jobs and economic activity down there, but we want the LID strategies. That's what the neighborhood group had come up with in their neighborhood plan. It's the #2 goal for development there. And you know, I asked, what are we doing to incentivize this? And nothing. And I think that that's really difficult. And I've got neighbors coming and knocking on my door wanting to know what's going on with this. And they said, you know, I thought we told the city that this was what we wanted, but they're a private property owner, and we don't have that much ability right now to do anything about that, but we could.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, like Seattle, or I mean, we're not inventing the wheel. This has been successfully done all over the nation. So maybe we could, I don't know.
Yeah, and so I think there's a lot of precedent. I know our city attorney has some concerns, which I think that we can deal with by showing him the other municipalities that have done that. And I've got a long list here. And, you know, they're not all big towns. Like one of them is Bellingham, Washington. They're about 98,000 people. So they're about our size. And so I guess I want to see, you know, is this something that you guys think is important? Do you want to be part of the process? And should I interject with these concerns on Tuesday night?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Can that, I mean, would it mess you up if bringing the Enduring Green Network and the LID stuff into it was part of the green building incentives, or do you need it to just be the hard
I think
stuff?
what we could do is just mention our intent to address all of those things. But the other thing is, you know, we don't want to hold up the planning department because building is starting to pick up, and so we really need to get on this and do it now. We certainly don't want to drag our feet. So if we're going to jump into this, I think this is something that, you know, next meeting we need to be looking at this. But, you know, we can mention that these are other things that we want to address, but let's start out by resolving that building height issue because they really want that taken care of. So I think we need to address that first, but we can keep in mind these other issues and get on them immediately following.
I would like to comment on building height in Fayetteville, Arkansas, because that is a huge thing when somebody living on a mountain, somebody builds down on the side, blocks your view, you know, things like that. And even down on Dixon and different places, there's been some issues about building height. So I don't know if that's going to rile some people or not, but there's an understandable fear of building height because of some things that have happened in the past.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so that's definitely a consideration. And in blocking solar access as well, it's not just views.
But views are big.
Is there any chance that, and I'm not completely familiar with the zones that this would pertain to, but could it in any way discourage any type of development in more of the downtown area and encourage people to just build somewhere else?
Because we need
That
to
would be
discourage sprawl.
Because we want to discourage sprawl as much as possible.
Encourage infill. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think generally, like we had Adventure Subaru came before the last council meeting about rezoning a parcel out on I-540, and they wanted the form-based code. And Alderman Petty asked them why they were opting for this more restrictive zoning, and you know, they said that they like that type of development and they thought it would be good for the neighborhood. And so, you know, here was a property owner thinking that that was going to maximize the value of their land by going ahead and doing that form-based code. So I think the smart ones will see the value in it, and a lot of real estate is location. People who want to be downtown want to be downtown.
That's true.
And I don't think that these are overly onerous. We're going to allow a lot of the things that we've been allowing, but we're just going to give them an opportunity to have more if they do better. So we're offering carrots instead of sticks.
I think that could be part of the discussion, though. I mean,
Just to make
an
sure.
an incentive that encourages infill rather than sprawl. So you're rewarded for infill versus you're rewarded for your location as well, potentially, as well as what your development consists of.
Yeah, and it could even be something like, you know, if you're building a multifamily unit that's not on a transit route, maybe you have to pay into a transit fund. You know, there are options like that, but I think we just have to look at it holistically. But right now, you know, if we could just deal with the building height issue and as an incentive, I think it's just the opportunity is right before us. So I think we need to act on it. Okay, so
So tomorrow night's council meeting. So one that I haven't read the whole agenda, and I wanted to mention maybe Peter and you could possibly see if it's possible to get the planning commission's agendas to have the easy to click on Granicus, where the meetings are announced, and where you find out what's on the agenda. On the city council right now, you click and you open up all the backup material, pictures, the whole works, and anybody can do it. And I'm able to copy that and put it on one of my sites, and then I'll put it up on Facebook and things to try to get people to come to the meetings, you know, and know what's going on. And Planning Commission, the agendas are not highlighted. I mean, the backup material's not highlighted where it's shown in the same spot on Granicus. And in order to actually see the backup material, and it used to be the same as council. For some reason, some changes have been made, and you have to go to another place and open a very convoluted thing to get to see all the backup for planning.
Okay,
And
so you want to see that supporting material linked on the Planning Commission
to make it
agenda.
much easier for the public.
Okay,
And the person with a laptop can go in that meeting and open that up.
okay.
And-
I'll
and
make
watch
that
it.
as a staff request
That
to
would be
Dawn.
great.
And
If it
I
made it
know
work.
that the planning department is very short-staffed right now.
Yeah.
So we have to be sensitive to that, but I think that I will certainly make the request. and
Thank
see
you,
what comes
thank you.
up.
But,
Okay, so I guess should we go ahead and vote on endorsing this idea of green incentives for buildings? That way I can say that the Environmental Action Committee supports that.
I make a motion, we pass your
Green building incentives plan?
Yes, thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion?
Just a quick question. Are we planning to frame the incentives or just suggest kinds of incentives? Are we actually going to describe an incentive and a relationship to an activity? Are we going to work that all out in our committee here?
I think if we just make recommendations that we would like to see height and density bonuses for environmentally preferable building practices, and I don't know, I mean, we could talk to the planning staff and see how much input they would like from us, but I think we should be involved in the process, but they're the professionals, and I think we need to respect their expertise, but we can certainly make suggestions and be a part of the conversation. What's your thought on that, Peter?
And we could, I agree, and we could have, you know, the specific proposal, we could ask that comes through us before it goes to city council, so that we could have a say in what the details are. But I agree, trying to hash out all the details at one of our
Not our
meetings.
job, yeah.
Yeah.
That's up
but-
to them. If they
They're
want
the
our
professionals, they're
Yeah.
the
Right,
folks that
but
really
I
know the
agree.
nuts and bolts and how to make
And
it
I'm
all
going to
work.
send them case studies, which I'm sure they
Yeah.
have, but just so that they have an idea. But I do like the idea that we'd like it to come through this
Yeah.
committee first.
Do you
Yeah, I
want
would have-
committee members at that meeting for support or not at this time?
It would be helpful if someone wanted to come and speak, or sending a letter and just saying that, you know, we see this as an opportunity to incentivize these green building practices, and we'd like you to pursue that.
So send a letter to the city council?
A letter would be good, or if
Or
you
an
can't
email?
make it to the meeting, yeah, or an email, that's what I mean, sorry.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
Well, I do actually get letters
The meeting is
sometimes.
tomorrow,
Help.
so
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
relying
that's
on
gonna-
Yeah, so you can
folks
send
to
them
start quickly.
email, or if you can't make it to the meeting, or if you'd like to come to the meeting. The meetings are always interesting.
They are.
So, okay.
Do you want to-
Yeah, just, you know, for me, I would have to see a list of things that would be considered incentives, just a name list, a bucket
absolutely.
list of some kind. Incentives that can be offered by
Uh-huh.
the city too. So that's kind of where I would need to start.
Okay. And there are some great lists online. Actually, the U.S. Green Building Council put together a document of the incentives for LEED, and I don't think we need to make this specific to LEED, but you know, they've identified a whole lot of them, and outline what the incentive is. Like, you know, let's see. But a lot of them are just, you know, if you earn LEED Silver certification, you can develop site at a higher density than a conventional project. Most of it is just a density bonus. Some of them give you like priority access or priority permitting access. Like if you regularly got a backlog in your permitting office, if you are going to do a LEED project, you can move to the front of the line. So, you know, for a developer trying to get some apartments built before the school semester, that could be an important incentive. But I think just talking to the planning staff, and because they work with those developers and they know what would have some impact with them. So I think it's just us saying that, hey, this is an opportunity. We want you to look at this. We're willing to help. We'd like to be a part of this process, but, you know, these are some suggestions.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I think that would be advisable.
Can I ask a question? Does this, when you're looking at this height requirement, is there a setback requirement that's attached to it?
Yeah, there's different step backs. So the higher you go, the further you have to be back. So hopefully that'll help address, you know, you don't want these giant tall buildings right at the street side, or, you know,
Like
it
they're
gives some
building
solar
at the corner
access.
of West and Lafayette?
Yeah, so it's learning from these projects that has inspired these code changes. So, you know, it's, planning is not an exact science. I mean, you just learn as you go.
Joe Kicklack texted and said he was sorry that he missed, and he works for Parks and Rec. Did y'all know that? He does so when they have ball games going on, he's like the advanced team, coordinates the ball games, and they just called the games again because of the weather, so he was going to try to rush up here, and I told him we're finishing. But
All right, well, so we had a motion and a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. And if we have we've got a couple of minutes, I wanted to let you know, the Green Economy Group has asked me to put forth a resolution to support a national revenue-neutral carbon fee and dividend in order to help slow climate change.
I love that.
So basically, I'll read the resolution and you see if this is something you want to get on board with. It says, whereas in 2012, Mayor Lionel Jordan signed the United States Conference of Mayors Climate Protection Agreement and its Climate Action Plan, and whereas there is a general scientific agreement that climate change is occurring and is at least partially the result of human activity, and whereas continuing to use fossil fuels at current rate will increase the long-term damage of climate change, which will become more and more difficult and expensive to reverse and even slow, and whereas a federal revenue-neutral carbon tax on fossil fuels would reflect their net real cost to our nation and citizens, and whereas such carbon tax revenue shall be returned to citizens to minimize or to mitigate the economic impact. Now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of Fayetteville, Arkansas, that we hereby express its support for federally mandated national revenue-neutral carbon tax with all revenues refunded to the citizens, and request that the United States Congress examine the feasibility of such carbon tax and dividend to citizens and enact such reasonable program to help slow climate change. And basically, the program that they're advocating for requires that the tax be collected, or the fee, I guess we should call it a fee, it's assessed at the source of the fuel, whether that's at the mine, the well, or the port of entry. And it would start out pretty low and then increase annually in predictable amounts until we've got green energy that's competitive with fossil fuels. And then that fee would be refunded to the citizens on an equitable basis. So kind of like how in Alaska, the citizens get a refund from the oil that their state sells, basically we would get a refund from the carbon that is produced. So that might help offset the impact to people in the lower end of the economic spectrum. So maybe you're paying more for gas at the pump, you get this refund check. So you're taxing the polluters and giving that money to the people, who could then turn around and invest in renewable energy if they chose. But what do you guys think about this?
I move that we support our council member in this effort to get this resolution passed.
Can I ask I'm trying to wrap my head around exactly what it means. So the resolution is just saying we support a national effort?
Yes.
Not that we're initiating anything in Fayetteville or even in Arkansas? we're just supporting this idea nationally.
We're supporting the idea nationally, and several senators and Congress people keep bringing this up, and it's not gaining any traction. So communities, just like we did with the Citizens United ruling, where we basically said we don't support this ruling, we'd like to have it overturned. That's the whole people as corporations or people. We said we don't like that. And so basically we're just saying that we support this as a community. Eureka Springs just passed this, and because we're not having a lot of luck with our elected representatives at the national level, I feel like representing
in Arkansas.
Yeah,
or
in
everywhere?
Arkansas, specifically in our community.
Yeah.
And what is revenue neutral? What, explain that.
That means that the government's not going to make any money off of it.
Okay.
So every bit of the fee that comes in is going to be returned to the citizens.
Okay, and in what form is it returned to?
Let's see. I'm looking at this website. Citizensclimatelobby.org has an explanation of it. And I believe it's like an annual refund check or something.
Well, I think that's part of what we're saying is we want the federal government to examine the feasibility of doing something like this and what would that actually look like.
Oh, we're not supporting an already
Well, there
laid
is
out
an
plan.
already laid out plan, but different representatives and senators, they come up with different versions, but we're just basically saying, we want this, do something about carbon. And something needs to be done.
So it's a carbon tax.
It's a carbon tax, but
Okay.
instead of using the word tax, we're using fee and dividend.
Fee and
Because it's
dividend,
not
because
go-
it will be returned to the people.
Return to the people.
So natural gas drilling would be
Yes,
taxed,
would be taxed.
not considered, okay.
And coal would be
Coal
taxed.
would be taxed.
So we would
So
go, fracking would, but the,
Sunlight would not be taxed.
right, but it would be taxed, like, potentially, you would pay more as a citizen
They have
who
to be
uses
some-
natural gas in your home. You would pay a tax on that natural gas, but because natural gas is extracted in Arkansas, you would also get money back.
Okay.
So it kind of could be a wash.
Yeah, the idea is that it's hopefully it costs the companies more because the company that extracts it is the one that's going to be paying the tax. We're not going to see that tax on our bill, but they're going to try and pass that
That'll
cost
just
off.
pass
to
Yeah,
us.
they'll pass that off.
They'll pass that off, and so that's why we have that ability. We have that refund check that we can use to pay it, but suddenly it's just an economic incentive to shift gears, and that's what we want to do is incentivize gear shifting.
I second Aubrey's motion.
All right, any further comments? All right,
Oh, I've been listening to this at Omni because they got the national phone call from CCL and so forth. So they have a committee on it too. I guess the idea is really to get the other side of the aisle to vote for it, to be, not hostile to the idea of the economics and so forth. But of course, no one knows what the future may bring. A few more superstorms, we may be burning our houses with dirt and planting tough indigenous plants all over them.
Not up here on Boston Island, so.
all right, so all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. I appreciate all of your time this evening. And David, did you have a comment?
Well, about 9 or 10 months ago, I came to the committee and I requested that the city consider adopting an open burning ordinance. And this committee, for whatever reason, has never addressed it. And I'm just wondering if I need, what I should do to try and get some action.
Okay, well, I think what we need to do is add that to our agenda for discussion like we did with the invasive species removal.
It is on our
Is it?
on there.
Is it
list
on
of
there? Is
things.
it on our list?
Yeah, it's on the list we looked at earlier.
Oh, it's on our list of goals?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was discussed at a
Got
meeting.
Aubrey's name by it.
Well, that's because I said, yes, I would.
So, Aubrey, what are we?
I call the fire department if I can't find the source of smoke I smell. I mean, I can't get this passed, but I've spoken to fire department, city officials, and some of the council members about it. And
I recall we had a pretty extensive
blasted on the
discussion when you
internet
brought it up
every
at that, and not necessarily formal, I don't know, formal or not, but anyway, I remember there being some discussion about, well, would that include people with fire pits in their backyards, or, you know, and so it was kind of left to needing more structure as a proposal, I guess, and maybe that's where you came in, saying that you would kind of see.
It really takes enforcing the existing rules, that they not burn
Okay.
anything but yard waste, and that we encourage them to use the mulching facilities of the city and all these things. Leave leaves, mow them on where they fall, don't burn them. You know, all that's crazy to burn anything unnecessarily. But people are in the habit, they grew up in the country, or they grew up in part of Fayetteville where it was the country a few years ago, and they were still doing it and burning in barrels. So I'm very concerned about it, but there are all these things like that mass amount of Savannah land that was sold by the city for development. And we talked about that at your last council meeting, and those guys, you know, I don't know if they'll do any,
If
make
I,
any
We've added
mitigation
some
efforts.
language to their
Contract.
sales contract.
Good for you, thank you.
So that, we tried to.
if I may, one of the things that got me to come here in the first place was when they were doing that first widening and clearing on crossover, and they were burning all these trees. Well, they're getting ready to do another widening north of Zion Road, and there's a lot of trees there, and so I don't know if they're planning to do it again, but in the meantime, in these last 10 months, the city of Springdale has created an ordinance where to do any open burning of any kind, people have to go and get a permit for that burn at the fire department. Now, this is the first time I'm aware of where the city of Springdale has actually taken the lead on some kind of environmental you know, progressive, slightly, incrementally progressive policy, but it just seems to me that this is something that is, you know, we should be able to do something about it. And if this committee's too busy, I'm just wondering, you know, what should I do to, you know, make something happen?
Don't you currently have to call the fire department and get permission to burn?
No.
No,
No?
you don't, and I thought you did too. As a matter of fact, I called the fire department when someone was burning because I was horrified.
Uh-huh.
But I found out, not, if it's not windy.
Well,
You
you're not
think that's
supposed to
wrong?
burn
Well, I may
construction
be
debris or anything.
misremembering what I read, but I thought you had to call.
I think
as
you do
well.
have to call.
They,
No,
they told me that,
No, they don't. You
as
call
long
the
as it
fire
wasn't
department and
windy.
ask them.
Or they had some water by.
They can initiate a burn ban, but anybody can go out and burn leaves. There's no restriction on that.
yes, that's what I got to from the fire department.
And obviously, they can burn whole trees, and they did that when they mowed down 3 acres of old-growth forest right off Weddington, and they burned all those trees, and that burned for 5 or 6 days. So, you know, to me, this is basic Clean Air Act kind of thing, and it just seems like it ought to be something that most people would support.
Well, I mean, as far as for residential burning, like, I know you can't take branches to the compost facility that are greater than 2 inches in diameter. And so, you know, then what do you do with that? And so
Kinda
my
must
solution
use
has
them
been.
for firewood for
Well, right.
something.
Yeah, if
Well,
you
I
have
mean, but if you don't
fireplace.
have a fireplace, so you use it for, or,
But-
like, I
And
cut
you're
down a
doing the
bunch of
same
those-
thing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
going out a chimney instead of off the ground.
And I
but-
cut it down a bunch of those worm bags off of my trees, and like, I could douse them in pesticide, or you can burn them. I mean, what
No,
else do you do with
You
those?
tear them open and the birds eat them. You don't have to.
I'm
All
not
right,
quite that
Aubrey.
brave.
Well, that's what I do. I mean,
Yeah.
the birds
I'll call you
appreciate
next
it.
time I
that-
Burning wood is, whether it's in a fireplace or out in the
Campfire
open,
pit
it's bad. It creates soot and it's bad for the air. But I don't think anyone is suggesting that we ban burning in fireplaces. But
Or barbecue.
the idea that, especially when people have these big piles of leaves, it can create massive, if there's not any wind, it can create a massive smoke issue right there in the neighborhood. And a lot of people are very sensitive to smoke. There's a lot of asthmatics, And I just think that it's, it's something that Fayetteville, should have a handle on.
Well, it's on our list, and
We need to see what the current rules are.
Yeah, and see what the current.
And compare to whatever this is Springdale's done, that'd be helpful.
I mean, all they did is said that you have to have a permit, and there's no, as far as I know, there's no way that they can deny it unless it's for something like burning household trash, which of course a lot of people around here still do. They have backyard burn barrels, which is illegal, but I know that there are a lot of people that do it.
Can you get us the language that was used in Springdale and maybe email that to Peter and he can email it to the group so that we could have that actual language of the ordinance that was passed there?
Because it sounds like Springdale can burn, but it's another step, which is good.
Which I thought, if nothing else, you have a way to gauge how much burning is actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a way so that if people are doing something that, if there are some standards, and there may be, you at least have the fire department, able to revoke a permit if they know that someone is.
Here's what the fire department's website says. It says, what are burn permit restrictions? Burning is not permitted should it create a public nuisance. Can't burn rubber tires, roofing, petroleum-based substances. No burning when the wind is strong. No burning during dry weather. No burning when smoke drifts or blows on the highway streets to the extent that it creates a traffic hazard. No burning unless unattended. No burning unless attended by a responsible adult, and no burning after dark. And then it says, how do I obtain a burn permit? Permission may be obtained free of charge via telephone or by other verbal means from any Fayetteville Fire Department authorized personnel. That said, permission will only be given on the day it is given, and all other burning on any other dates will require renewed permission.
So they're saying you do have to have a permit to do any burning?
I don't think so. Is that what it's saying? What was the burn
It
permit?
said you have to call them.
Yeah, you have to call and let them know.
But
let 'em know.
I guarantee you that there's people in my neighborhood who don't know anything about that.
But you have
And
to
the
speak
other-
to them personally.
Yeah, the other issue is that our fire department is understaffed, like many of our city departments. And, I think we're going to be looking at that. Staffing is one of the priorities, I think, that we're going to look at with our surplus, or not surplus, it's some of our reserve money. But right now, I'm really hesitant to add any workload to understaffed departments because business is picking up. But
I wonder if code enforcement could go.
they're also very understaffed. Are they short like 2 positions?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that dangerous grass is growing fast right now.
Yeah, so, maybe it's something we just go ahead and educate about the current ordinance. But I don't know what the answer is.
Are we sure what the current ordinance is? I'm still a little
It
It sounds
confused
like
on
you're
that.
supposed to call and let them know.
Okay.
Is that a policy or
So
an
that's the permit.
ordinance?
That's,
I think it
Fire
says
department
call and
website.
It's their
Get
website. It'd take a while to dig out the ordinance language.
and I have called when I've smelled burning. It didn't smell like yard waste. I smelled something that smelled like construction waste,
plastic
and I called.
and treated wood and.
Well, it sounds like there's interest in the group of talking about it again, but it's 7:15 now, so
Well,
could we add it to an agenda maybe
Sure,
in
Let's do
sure.
that.
July and then talk about it
I'd
more?
like it. I'd like that.
Have you talked with Sue Butler, the
No.
education
I
person at the
don't
fire
know who
department?
that is.
She's the public education person for the fire department. Might be worth
Yeah.
having a conversation with her about what they're doing related to education. She
Why
could
don't we
probably-
have Sue Butler come and we'll discuss it and she can come and tell us about it
That's
too.
At
not
some
bad
point in
as
the
well.
future, but I think we've got the next couple of meetings. We've got pretty booked
We're
up,
booked.
but
Yeah, and we have a
We
huge
need to meet
number of
once a
goals
week.
there, and so.
But
we may
since
wanna
this is
zero in on
it's something that Dave feels passionate about, I think that's a good good next
Mhm.
step.
I do.
And in the meantime, let's
Because I just don't think that when a citizen comes, wanting some action and nothing happens, and it's like, well, okay, so what, if y'all are too busy or whatever, what's the alternative? When I first brought it up, I got told, one of the members who's no longer on this committee said, well, we just don't think there's any support for it, and we shouldn't spend another minute discussing it. And to me, and that was kind of, and that was the end of the discussion. So I didn't know if that was, you know, sort of like the kiss of death to my idea or whatever, but
I think it's just.
but clearly the message was citizens come here with a concern, and this is where the idea goes to die. I'm not saying that that's
David,
what anyone here
okay, David,
thinks.
As the chairperson of this group, I'm gonna, and we're already running past time, I'm just gonna ask you to look at this huge list that we have here, and these are all worthy and important goals, and we tackle them as we are able.
Okay.
And any citizen is welcome to launch their own initiative to deal with any problem that they see fit, and we work as we can. But we're a voluntary body. We meet once a month, and we do as much as we can, and we can't get to everything. But I appreciate you.
And I'm
bring that
not
up.
criticizing this group. I'm just saying that this was the impression I got, that this was the place to start, and so.
Well,
but I appreciate that there's so much to do.
It's important that you don't interrupt.
Okay.
And so it's on the list. It is something we keep an eye on, and it's as time allows, we will focus on it. But we're just kind of we're putting out fires of a different sort right now.
So to speak.
So, all right. With that, I want to thank everyone for
Chairman,
coming.
I
Oh,
move
yes.
we adjourn.
Thank you. All right.
One last reminder I'd like to give everyone is that we do have a six-member quorum requirement, and that we don't have that met by 6:45 for future meetings. They'll have to be called.
5:45.
At 5:45 for future meetings, yes, thank you.
So,
So I'll put that in an email reminder along with the next agenda, but it's really important that we start on time so that we can, cover the business that we have and we can have a quorum.
And I want to make one positive announcement to let you guys know, and this is congratulations to the city and to the school district. And I announced that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. That the Arkansas Highway Commission has given Fayetteville, they received a Safe Routes to Schools grant. They approved an application for a trail bridge over Clabber Creek along Salem Road, and it's funded for over $81,000, and that'll help improve connectivity to both Holcomb and Holt schools in the school district. So,
Wonderful.
partnership between the school district and the city. So, thanks, Pete.
Just got notice today.
Right.
That's great news. Well, thank you, everyone. Let's just all make a point to be on time next time, and I appreciate your involvement. Meeting is
You
adjourned.
work on time.